back to Block TV, and today we are joined by Ethan Pierce, Director of the CryptoAssets Institute. Ethan, thanks for joining us.
Always a pleasure.
All right, now, Ethan, the big news last week was Apple and Google actually teaming up to help fight and track COVID-19. But now this week, it seems like the blockchain community also is banding together for a solution.
Yeah, the Apple and Google thing is very interesting in the sense that not only are they working together, but what that could fundamentally mean in terms of what they want to do. First, in May, they want to roll out some APIs that will enable kind of Android and iOS devices that are using public health apps to kind of interoperate and work together. And then second, what they then want to do is kind of push out a bigger Bluetooth-based contact tracing platform that will kind of build that into the OS itself. And they're saying that privacy and transparency and consent are all extremely important to that. That brings up the common discussions of anything when large companies and governments start getting involved in this, which is why we see more and more privacy first things starting to pop up. So I think one of the really cool ones, simply because it's actually been launched and is available, is Coalition, which is a project from Nodal. You might know Nodal from, they're a big Internet of Things connectivity and security company. So they've got a couple different apps and projects that deal around how connected objects communicate and the data that's shared between them and how to secure that using digital ledger technologies. And so what they're wanting to do here with Coalition is basically have more of a community-driven approach and keep it very much around privacy by design. So when you download the app and you install it, it'll use the Bluetooth low energy on your phone to be able to kind of keep track of the people that you encounter within a certain number of feet, and then how long you are around those individual contacts. Each person's phone will generate a random ID that it stores on the phone and that it updates every like 15 minutes or so. And then it will store, whenever it finds somebody else, it will store their IDs on the phone as well. None of that's pushed back out to the cloud or to a centralized network anywhere. And then the way that's going to work on the contact tracing part is if one of you, as a user, you have the app and you are confirmed to have COVID-19, you can go into the app and declare that you have been diagnosed. And what that will do is the random IDs from the past 2 weeks that you've collected on your phone will then only at that point get transmitted out to the service itself, up to the cloud, and it will then ping. So any of the other people that are using the app, if their ID is one of the ones, if one of the IDs they've been using, because those IDs rotate, is one of the ones that's in that batch, then they will get notified that somebody that they spent time around in proximity with over the past couple of weeks has been tested positive, and that will allow them to then be able to deal with their public health authority and their healthcare providers to determine if they need testing, if they're asymptomatic or not, and how to go with things like that. That's really cool because it doesn't mean that there's no data that's being shared there in a way that really can identify you in the large sense. There's always ways that things like this can potentially be hacked if you're really trying hard enough, but this is removing most of the barriers. And that will allow us to to have some trust in the fact that we can be tracked with our interactions with other people, and only in the case of ourselves or one of these other people testing positive would that information start to be connected together. The Nodal's founder is the guy who created FireChat, which is the Bluetooth-based messaging technology that people might have heard of in the past couple of years at some of the internet shutdowns around revolutions, but also things like cruise lines and disaster recovery and stuff. Whenever there's no communication network, when the cell towers are down or the internet's not working, they can communicate in a mesh way between the devices. So they got a pretty long history of working in this space. And now they're rolling out this kind of application to work on the COVID-19 crisis. So it's available on the Google Play Store. And I guess approval's waiting for iOS. That should be coming pretty soon. We mentioned Apple and Google are doing their own thing. You've also got the Pan-European Privacy Preserving Proximity Tracing Standard, the PPPP/PT, I think, or something like that, PEPP/PT. The concern about many of these things is just whether or not they'll be truly decentralized, which just doesn't seem to be the case to most, which then brings up the potential privacy concerns. I guess we'll see where this goes, but it's pretty cool to see a blockchain startup leading the way and publishing already an app that we can go use.
Yeah, it was very interesting, this Bluetooth solution that also Google and Apple are apparently in discussions about possibly using as well, is an excellent way to actually track contact tracing, because it allows you to see who you were nearby without actually showing where you were, which does get rid of a lot of the privacy issues, although they still do remain, especially when dealing with these big companies. But like you said, it is interesting. I do like the more blockchain community-driven approaches, which we just spoke about, and hopefully it does take off because it does make us all feel better, no pun intended.
Well, I think we also want to, is there really going to ever be 100% privacy in a lot of these situations? And do we even need it, in the sense of, I mean, that's the debatable thing here is does it have to be absolutely private in terms of the data that's being collected and how that's being used? Obviously things can be misused, but there also is a greater good here to be looked at about, making sure that we're protecting as many people, the people who are most at risk from something like COVID, but also the medical community that is putting their lives at risk to treat these people. So the more that we can limit that, the better. I'm not against giving up a little bit of potential privacy around where I'm going and who I'm meeting if that helps fight that, but we need to make sure there are enough mechanisms in place to limit the way that information can be abused. Coalition seems like a pretty good, pretty cool solution to that.
Mm-hmm. It is very interesting because before this whole pandemic, all of us were pretty much giving, permission for our exact location to our maps, to our apps that even find the nearest coffee. I mean, it's only when these big things hit and then and it hits the news do people start to finally wake up and realize what they're actually giving away, what they're actually selling. But
you can go into Snapchat and see where all your friends are at and what they're doing, and so we're happy to give that up whenever it serves our fun little internet purposes. I think there's also a use case for the greater good. So
exactly. And now speaking of sort of I don't want to say police states, but places where your private information is probably less secured. There's a new blockchain innovation alliance in China, which with huge domestic and also foreign companies involved. Who's in it, and what is its purpose?
Yeah, so the Blockchain Innovation Alliance is based in the Yuzhong district, which is the central business district of Chongqing. So Chongqing, for most of us in the West who've never actually heard of it or been there, is 31 million people across the municipality. It's 18 million of them in the urban district. So for comparison, New York City is 8 million, London's 10 million, and Paris is 2 million. So one of these just massive urban centers in China. And so what they've done is create this regional alliance, but it's obviously going to be something that's going to play out on a larger national sense in China over time. You've got things like Huawei and other huge communications companies in China. You've got tech leaders like Tencent and Alibaba and Baidu. You've got Inspur, which is one of the leading cloud computing companies in China. You've also got global companies like IBM and others in play. And so the idea there is to kind of create an open platform to build enterprise solutions using the blockchain. And they announced at the same time the U Express chain, which is being built on Inspur's blockchain services platform. And that'll kind of be the blockchain engine and development provider for a lot of this. They expect to see thousands of patent applications in the enterprise space and dozens of really interesting blockchain application scenarios to be developed over the next couple of years. They expect this to create billions of dollars of value. It's very much a strategic priority for them. That's not a lot of news yet about what they will do with it, but it's a serious amount of players, around 60 of them so far, joining together to start to build this initiative. About the same time, Huawei also announced their new blockchain as a service platform. It's called BCS, Blockchain Service, and that's to enable enterprise development of smart contracts on top of DLT. So tons of really cool things going on in that space. There's also going from there, we go to another big thing, that this blockchain service network that they now launched in China. So not linked to the first thing. This is another project. This is a national thing. It's been about 6 months in testing. Internally, it's the Chinese government's the National Development Reform Commission. It's China Telecom, China Unicom, China UnionPay coming together to build a centralized platform. So not a protocol, but a platform. It's going to pull together all kinds of different enterprise blockchain protocols and public chains to basically create a system where people can build applications at reduced cost and with better regulatory oversight. We'll see what that means exactly according to the white paper. But the idea is that instead of spending maybe tens of thousands of dollars building something like building your app or your DLT solution on something like Ali Cloud or Huawei Cloud, that they want to this on BSN would be a couple $100s a year. So right now they're integrating permissioned blockchain frameworks, several Chinese protocols, but also Hyperledger Fabric. But they've also said that they'll be incorporating some public protocols like Ethereum and EOS. So should be interesting to see. But this is not a small project, and it's being deployed already globally in the sense of some of the players have already deployed the public nodes for this service network in France, in the UK, in Singapore, in Italy. So it's something that's already scaling up through its internal test, and now it's being released, I believe on the 25th is the official launch, this to go out.
Yeah, it's really interesting. I mean, these are two different big stories, one focusing on the private sector in China and the one focusing on the public sector blockchain in China. Really interesting that China is, I'm not sure if it's connected, but they've been working on it for a while. China is setting itself up to be the leader, the global leader for blockchain. It's not just, like we said, domestic companies, but even big international companies like IBM is focusing also on in China. And this is kind of fits hand in hand with China's overall strategy with their, their One Belt Road. They're kind of building infrastructure worldwide to set themselves up as a global leader. And who knows really how things will look post COVID-19. China is slowly opening up, one of the first countries to do so. So it's really interesting developments here on the blockchain front. Now, this next story we have right here is about a crowdfunding platform buying another crowdfunding platform through a purchase that ironically itself was not crowdfunded.
Yeah, so, well, if, a lot of people might already know Republic, they do typical equity revenue sharing type crowdfunding, but also tokenized securities around that idea too. So that's a player that's been doing a tremendous amount of work with different projects and has already gotten a lot of visibility. Fig is a similar platform that is focused on games. And the idea being, instead of a large gaming company deciding which game that they're going to push out into development and then into release, basically people who want to build games can push these out on Fig as an investment opportunity. Fans and individual investors can then back that. And based on that, that allows things to get funded and potentially be pushed out into the market. And so what's really cool about that then is not only is this an investment opportunity in the sense that a lot of games can make a tremendous amount of revenue, as we've seen with all of the different app economies and the way this can work, but some of these apps can bring in tens, if not hundreds of millions of dollars in revenue a month. And a lot of times the infrastructure to run that, while it's expensive on a certain level, is there's a clear margin there in terms of profit. So it's a very interesting place in terms of investment, but also what's important is that games need a pretty significant push to make sure that they get adopted. And some of the best people for that are your investors, but how many do you have as in that? Well, in this case, if you're getting hundreds or even thousands of people to invest in your game before it's being built, we've seen this on Indiegogo before and elsewhere, and Fig has quite a few examples of this working extremely well. These people really become your champions, and so they're the ones who are going to go out and communicate to their networks and create this community that potentially could have a big part in a game's early adoption and therefore in its success. The last 3 years, they've had positive returns for their investors on the investments, which is a lot of crowdfunding platforms, especially with startups on the equity side, have not necessarily always come through with great returns. So they've got some good history to bank on there. Teaming up with Republic gives them a new community, gives them new tools, and merges kind of some pretty cool stuff there together. So I think that's going to be fun to see where that goes. We already have this idea of regular crowdfunding on the rewards side, like Indiegogo, Kickstarter. Then we have equity crowdfunding, where you get a piece of the action of the companies that you're investing into. We've got tokenized securities, where we take that whole model and we push it out into more of a structured idea where it can be more automated through smart contracts, and we're actually tokenizing the underlying asset itself. And then we have things like Nifties, where we can create non-fungible tokens related to, potentially the different pieces of the different, I don't know, let's see, like the things you're wearing or the weapons you have, or other, the gravatars, or all the different things that you might have. So we kind of start smashing all that stuff together. We get into some pretty interesting space. Blockchain can be right in the middle of it. I think that's pretty cool. Moving forward, obviously, the past 2 months, and definitely the next 6 months, the venture capital industry has taken a pretty big hit in terms of it has slowed down significantly. So, well, I guess the real hit is the startups that aren't getting that money. A lot of money is still being invested. A lot of those deals were sourced before the crisis, but there's also a lot of stuff going on now. There's a lot of companies that are doing more activity and scaling even more during this time, because people are at home, playing more games, using more apps, using more tools for work from home. So all of those companies need more capital and are showcasing even better, interesting scenarios for investors. So money is being deployed, but a lot of people are going to need to find new ways to, as we move forward, to potentially fund their activities. And I think that these crowdfunding examples we're just going to see more of that. It's going to scale more significantly. We're going to see more success models. So pretty cool to see gaming and equity crowdfunding getting together and tokenizing all that, and see where we go.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, the blockchain has definitely enabled kind of the decentralization of funding, where, taking the opportunity where historically it's been in the hands of those few VCs and private equity firms, and putting it into the hands of the communities, where now communities can fundraise themselves for smaller amounts. Thank you so much, Ethan, for joining us and taking us around the globe in the safest way possible in these days to fill us in on all the latest updates in blockchain and crypto. And for all of viewers at home, if you want more on blockchain, crypto, and tech news, make sure to check us out at BLOCKTV.com.
Watch us on Amazon Fire TV and Roku.